G'day, I'm Dan. I am half of Everyday Property Investing with Kaz. I'm a teacher, a full-time teacher, and I'm a property investor, and I've spent actually a lot more time of my life investing in property than I have teaching. Before I was a teacher, I travelled around the world with the professional sports circuit, and I'm also an engineer by qualification. So I studied at university before I did any travelling. I started investing because I knew that I needed to take care of my own financial future. And I've got a real passion for property and for investing and for seeing what you can do to places. Getting into investing, it just made sense that if I'm earning money, and at the time I suppose when I finished university, I was self-employed for a while, and I figured that it just made sense that I took control of my finances, and the way I was going to take control of my own finances was to invest and to start really considering what I wanted to do with my own money, rather than trust someone else who would potentially, I don't know, I wanted to take control of my own finances. I probably had a look at a few different sorts of investments, and property was the one that I felt I could understand the most. I looked at shares, I looked at managed funds, I looked at a traditional savings account, and I looked at property. They were probably the four main investment avenues that I looked at. And what I found was that I felt that shares were too risky. I think it's the sort of business you can make or lose a lot of money in a very short amount of time. And I also felt that you needed a lot of expert knowledge with shares. With managed funds, I always felt that there was a middleman who was eating away at your profits. So I was less likely to go into that, because I thought, if I'm going to make profits, if I'm going to invest smartly, I want to get the maximum return. Savings accounts, as safe as they were, I felt didn't provide the level of return I was hoping for. Of course, one of my main goals is to be financially independent as soon as possible. So to work with a very slow method wasn't going to appeal as much, which left property, and I felt that I didn't need to have I didn't need to do the same amount of research to invest in property as I did in shares. My level of expertise could be gained probably a little bit faster. There was a lot of readily available material that I could find, especially at that stage in books, newspapers, magazines, and then the internet. So property seemed to me to be the natural one. And the other thing is, I felt that if you invest in property, you find that values of property don't just plummet overnight. There's bricks and mortar. It's something you can actually see, and it's a tangible sort of an investment. So I felt as though property was something I could drive past, I could look at, I could keep control of. If I really wanted to, I could improve it. I could put money into it and fix it up or manage it that way. So I suppose there were quite a number of advantages that I saw in property. My main strategy with property investing is to buy properties and hold them, keep them for as long as possible until I have a number of properties that are essentially fully owned by me, that have tenants who are paying for my retirement. So it's a buy and hold strategy. I look for properties that have positive cash flow, because I figure when you have positive cash flow, you can continue using that income to build your portfolio and to build your own wealth. You don't run into a position where there's a limit on the number of properties you can have, which you can do with negative gearing. So it's basically a positive cash flow buy and hold strategy to get me to a position of independent wealth as quickly as possible. I've got investment properties in 3 different states of Australia. I don't have anything overseas, although I have in the past held 1 property overseas. I have a combination of houses and units, and I have my properties in a combination of metropolitan areas and rural areas. So I look for a diversity within my own portfolio. I look for having different types of properties in different places, and I do that because I want to make sure that I've spread my eggs in a few different baskets. I've also got, as well as my place of residence, I also have a lifestyle property, so a holiday house that I quite enjoy. And the only reason I have the holiday house is because my other property investments have enabled me to buy a second place that I can sort of relax in. I first invested, I would have been just before my 30th birthday. I started investing, and I would have bought my first property, and within 10 years I've got what I've got. So before my 40th birthday I had sort of 10 properties. I think the hardest thing for me to overcome when I first started investing was feeling that I didn't know enough, and thinking that I needed to read one more book or have one more conversation or meet that one person who was an expert that would make the difference between me being successful and unsuccessful. And I think I started overcoming that when I met with people who were investors, and we started having proper structured conversations, and I started realizing that actually I probably knew more than I needed to know to start. And so being able to do that and understanding, I had confidence in property. Properties, it's not something you lose a lot of money in. And so when I finally got to meet other people who were actually doing it, who were actually investing, who actually knew different strategies and where to look. When I started, I thought that you invested in property. That's it. That was the strategy, was to invest in property. Not that there were different ways to do it. Not that you could have different outcomes. And so once I started realizing that there were different techniques I could use, it was really a case of developing confidence. And I think working with other people and having other people helping is a great way to build your confidence and to actually start doing it. The one thing I definitely do differently is I would buy earlier. I would have started earlier. I would have backed my own judgment and started earlier. There's no reason I couldn't have invested 3 or 4 years before I actually did. But by waiting, I actually slowed down the whole process, and I probably would have been a considerable amount, further down the path had I started earlier. So the one thing I definitely would have done, I would have started earlier, and I would have involved myself in a local group, in a community where we might meet and have a chat or talk about property. They're the 2 things. But number 1, I would have started earlier. I would have not allowed myself to be held back by my perceived lack of knowledge.